So I have a finished piece, um, and I'm partial to it, because I spent a lot of time working on it.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll try out like 8 different styles that I've been wanting to try instead of doing 8 different sketches.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've always been looking for something that sort of melded both pencil and ink in this very sort of distinct style.
Yeah.
One of my all-time favorite hip-hop producer, DJ Premier from Gangstar,
Mm-hmm.
the instant you hear a DJ Premier beat, you know it's him.
Yeah.
You don't have to check album credits. You just know it's him. I want that effect with my art.
Nice.
I don't want you to have to look for my signature. I want you to instantly know it's mine. When I look at Jim Lee's work, I know it's Jim Lee's work. When I look at Joe Medwera's look, I know it's his. And I want that. I want people to be like, that's a Gibbs piece. No doubt about it. And that's what I've been working really hard on. 2011, I spent that whole year mentally developing a style, and I've finally gotten comfortable with it, where it's achieving its purpose. So this piece also serves as that, where every style that I was developing is apparent in this piece.
So the name of this piece is what?
At Arm's Length.
At Arm's Length.
And
is this going to be featured in the show?
It is.
It is.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's a 2-page piece. They both line up perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit off skew. As you can see, the whole piece is kind of swaying.
Is there
sort
a
of
swirl in the middle?
Exactly.
Yeah. Almost like one of those hurricane.
Kind of like a vortex or a nebula, whatever you want to interpret it as.
Yeah.
I use the nebula for reference personally, but whatever somebody wants to project onto it.
Yeah. Personally, I'm reminded, being a mariner of sorts.
Yeah.
I see the hurricane symbol.
Yeah, and they're both essentially, it's the same structure, just different material.
Yeah, yeah.
Same motion, same everything.
Yeah.
And
so the umbilical that connects the two.
It's actually, if you look real close, they're shackles.
They're shackles. Oh, it looks like an umbilical almost.
Yeah.
But then I see the split at the end.
Yeah.
And that's the curious thing. It doesn't go into the belly.
And all of that is sort of metaphorical.
Okay.
Because they're connected. They're both me.
All right.
So they're shackled together, at arm's length of each other, almost mirror images of each other.
But not quite.
Right.
And even the shackles change.
Yes, and both characters have things that are distinct to the other one. And whether or not these characteristics are real is a concept that I'm going to be playing with as I go forward with the project.
Okay.
There are many things that are frankly just really difficult for me to put into words. Like for me, this is trying to translate like a visual language. If I had words, I probably wouldn't feel the need to draw it. But one thing that you'll see me playing with is anti-hero with wings, different wings too, not always the same. The wings may be real in some pieces of art. They may be entirely theoretical in others. And one line from one of my pieces is, "These wings are holding on to the things that keep me grounded." And that stems from this piece, where I just kind of wanted to create something that almost looked organic, but out of completely inorganic material. Like there's concrete, there's sheet metal, cables. Yeah, and these are wings that certainly could not fly.
Yeah. So the name of this piece is Bleeding Demons?
Yeah.
And is this also going to be in the show?
Yep. Everything you're going to see today is in the show.
Okay. Excellent.
In fact, the sort of graffiti, sort of street art style pieces are actually what I consider anti-heroes art and not mine.
Okay.
So I've tried to go that in depth with it. So half the art you see,
creating pieces from the persona
of the character. All of the poetry is from the perspective of both characters.
Okay.
Which is all loosely based on me. It's like the three of us together.
Yeah.
Which is kind of why I created those pieces there. It's a 3-piece series. The title piece to the show, Duality.
Yep.
I kind of, without telling everyone, I kind of want everyone to get the feel that these characters are both extensions of myself, just different opposing sides.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a million reasons why I chose to do that. But one of the main reasons is that being that the two characters exist in a police state, one's an enforcer, one's a revolutionary,
Mm-hmm.
is I give a lot of thought to revolution. And one thing that I kind of want to express is I think that revolution comes in many different forms.
Mm-hmm.
But the first form of revolution that I've given a lot of thought to is obviously violent revolution. I've thought a lot about that. Why they fail, why when revolutions succeed they become the oppressor,
Mm-hmm.
and things like that. And I personalize everything because that's how I make sense of things.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like if let's just say 10 years from now, America's erupted into some sort of civil war, no matter how large or how small.
Mm-hmm.
If I can picture myself throwing a Molotov cocktail through a window at Bank of America, I'm not actually going to do any good. I might be making a statement against this country, but the people that I'm actually hurting in that bank are absolutely no different from me.
It's a fascinating perspective.
And I think it's a really honest perspective.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the 1%, the powers that be, whatever you want to call them, whatever perspective you choose to view them from, these people always stay in power. You know what I mean? These people benefit from pitting working man against working man.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all it is. You know, if we take it upon ourselves to become citizen soldiers and fight the cops in New London,
Mm-hmm.
all we're doing is fighting people who are paying bills and putting food on their table.
Right, that's sort of the inherent paradox of any violent revolution.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you're just pitting brother against brother.
Yeah.
That's all you're doing. While the people who are in power are honestly barely affected.
Right.
These people remain untouched. Their money might take a little bit of a drop, but I mean, honestly, like a living wage is nothing to these people.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? We could all be paid living wages, and it would be just, I mean, literally like fractions of pennies to these people.
Right.
Which is why the system is broken, because the fact that they can either see that and ignore it, or
Yeah.
can't see it and refuse to believe that that is the case.
Yeah.
Um,
Either way, it's not a good scenario.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And
So
not sustainable.
right.
Yeah.
Right. So we're all sort of either ignoring or becoming painfully aware of this failing societal structure, and you know, we get really fired up and we get really angry. We want to do something about it.
Yeah.
Some of us. And what do? What do we really do?
Stomp and cuss a few nights at
Exactly.
the bar.
Maybe hurt
Yeah.
somebody who's not actually responsible for it,
Yeah.
and nothing actually gets done.
Yeah.
And in that same token, every crime we commit,
Mhm.
especially on large scales,
Mhm.
we get our rights taken away from us.
Yeah.
Because all it
Everybody
takes
does.
is exactly.
Yeah.
All it takes is a crisis from one group of people
Yeah.
to get all of our rights taken away, and we'll demand it.
Yeah.
We'll demand that our rights be taken away to prevent more things like this happening.
Yeah.
Right? So we actually manufacture dissent by trying to do something about it.
Yeah.
And I don't know the answer of getting around it.
Or manufacture oppression, do you mean?
Yes.
By trying to do something about
Right,
it.
right. And you know, I'm not smart enough to know the way around it. I do think that it's there.
Yeah.
Um,
And it probably kind of centers around some sort of nonviolent action
yes,
at the heart of it.
yes, an
But-
intellectual revolution.
An intellectual revolution, yeah. A revolution of the mind
Yes,
and perception.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm trying to communicate. That's sort of my ulterior motive with this project. I'm trying to communicate that. So I'm going to be putting these characters into some harrowing situations.
Yeah.
And this is basically when Antihero theoretically throws a Molotov cocktail at Ordinary Joe, he's hurting himself.
Right.
I'm hurting myself, is what I'm trying to sort of communicate. And I don't have an answer to it. I just have a perspective.
You don't have an answer, but what you're not necessarily seeking an answer with this phase of the project. You're
Right.
more trying to identify the problem.
Yes.
Would that be one way
Yes,
to put it?
and trying to get maybe people who are smarter than me
Yeah.
to maybe identify it better.
Yeah.
Because I can hardly put it in words. I
And
use
propose
art to,
solutions, perhaps.
yeah,
Yeah.
because I'm using art to translate this. Like I can't
Yeah.
quite get a hold of it.
Yeah.
But if I can inspire somebody that's smarter than me that can get a hold of it, then
Yeah.
maybe I would have done my job.
Yeah.
You know, who knows? I'm not sure.
Maybe you're doing your job right now.
I hope so.
Yeah.
It feels right.
It does. I'm inspired by your work, and the more I study it and the more you explain it to me, the more I think it is perfect for this time. It is a product of this time. I'm not good at pulling quotes out of the top of my head, but you know, I've there's some. I'm just gonna terribly paraphrase it, but there's some phrase I've heard having to do with artists being the antennae of their age, sort of like the receivers of transmissions.
Yeah.
And kind of the bellwether of the collective unconscious, and kind of receiving all this information, being a more sensitive sort, you know, a more sensitive intellect. You receive all this information and you're compelled to produce it. Produce something out of it, and what takes shape out of it is something like this, or, you know, take any, you know, prolific artist of their time. You know, you find, if you look into it and you see a message, you know, you can read into the kind of the collective unconscious of that age.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And at the risk of sounding cocky and pretentious, I try not to say that, but that's exactly what I feel like when I'm producing this art.
No, that'll be my job.
But yeah, I'm afraid that if I say that to somebody, you know, then I sound like just some guy walking down the street trying to peddle religion.
It's all good.
And
I'll take care of that for you.
my man. But that is exactly what it feels like.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, like it's just, I don't know where all this shit comes from.
Yeah.
You know, and if I could translate it better, I would.
But this is such a key aspect. Really, I'm reminded of a movie, Woody Harrelson and a couple other people in it. It's based on the battle in Seattle, 1999, the WTO protests. Are you familiar with that?
No, I'm not.
It was the first major protest that occurred against the WTO. WTO tried to have one of their meetings in Seattle, and a lot of organizations like Common Cause and MoveOn.org mobilized to raise awareness, and it kind of caught fire in the sense that there were essentially riots in the streets. There were riots in the streets. There were, you know, cops and protesters beating on each other. It got messy. The mayor declared states of emergencies and tried indefinite detentions of the protesters, which caused more backlash. It went on for, I think, the better part of a week, to possibly 10 days. And in the end, WTO got nothing accomplished, but some would say that was their goal anyway. Like,
Yeah.
you know, all the real deals are done off screen,
Right.
and those are just pro forma anyway. But all that aside, it in that movie, in the dramatization of it, there's a moment where, you know, Woody Harrelson's character is portrayed as a regular guy who just happens to be a cop, who suddenly finds himself being asked by his superiors to put on the riot gear, and he doesn't really know what any of this is all about. But all he does know is that once he's out there, you know, and he's got personal issues going on, like, you know, his wife just had a miscarriage, and there's a backstory there that,
Yeah.
you know, portrays him as a person who really could care less about what is happening and why he's on the job, but suddenly
Right.
he's being thrust into a position where he has to inflict this arbitrary authority. Uh,
I
on these
really want to
people.
see this.
Yeah, The Battle in Seattle.
I'm going to look for it.
Yeah, it's on Netflix and all that.
All right,
You know,
beautiful.
it's been out for a while. But Andre 3000's in it, Michelle Rodriguez. I can't remember the name of the male protagonist that ends up in the scene with Woody Harrelson, but basically there's a scene where there's some conflict between protesters and the cops, and this one protester steps up and calls Woody Harrelson a fascist pig or something to that effect, and you know, hurls enough insults that Woody just snaps and, you know, chases him down, and, you know, they actually like run through a church, and in the back stairs of a church, like he puts a beating on him.
Nice.
And is pulled off by another cop. But then, you know, 12 hours later, the protesters in prison, Woody Harrelson has a moment of reflection and comes to the cell, and they have a conversation, and the protester actually forgives Woody's character for snapping. He's like, you know, and he articulates this sort of duality where he's like, this ain't your fight, you know, and really we should not be fighting each other.
Right.
You know,
Right.
Yeah. So you should definitely check out that movie.
Yeah, I absolutely will.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think this is a conversation that's long past having. Needed to be had, and you know, one of my ambitions with the scope is to try to demonstrate that, you know, that you know, the passion on all sides of any conversation, any
Yeah.
issue is valid.
Absolutely.
The passion is valid.
Mhm.
The way we articulate that passion, you know, the desire for some sort of freedom, or you know, the feeling of infringement of your rights, that's pervasive. And that's the most interesting thing I think about the time we live in right now, is that everyone on some level feels like they're getting screwed by the system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone is discontented with it.
Yeah. And I would say they're all right.
Yeah.
They're all right.
Absolutely.
You know, like that is the one thing that we all have in common, is that we all get screwed.
Mm-hmm.
How and why and, you know, who we choose to blame, that's all up for debate.
Yeah.
And that is where I think the challenge is on us to communicate better with each other.
I agree.